Hello, welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Musgrave, joined by Mark Crothers for the Monday show on a Saturday. We're here to talk about Newcastle United's 1-0 defeat to Manchester United down at Old Trafford. Night of frustration. So much to talk about, and we're going to get into why Newcastle United lost and look at the bigger picture as well. Big thanks to NordVPN and fpro.com for their sponsor of the show, ensuring that this podcast keeps coming to you guys for free. Do get your discounted offers on both products by clicking the link in the podcast description box. Mark, welcome back. Did you have a nice Christmas?
I did very good, yeah. Santa was very, very good to the kids. Both of our two did very well. And it was lovely, like just proper family Christmas. Managed to get all my work done by the day before Christmas Eve, whatever day that was. I have no idea where we're at right now, but yeah, I just spent it with the family. Been a bit of a tough year without going into details, so it was nice to spend that proper time together. And recording this from my old bedroom at my mum's house in Leamington. We always spend Boxing Day at my mum's and have another kind of second Christmas day, so that was fun. How about yourself?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Had to help Santa's elves build a doll's house for my little girl, and managed to give myself a lovely blister because I'm not very DIY. In the mind, but we got there and she's absolutely loving it. So yeah, we've had a lovely Christmas. It's all about the food, though, isn't it? Really, that's what I care about now. Give me pigs and blankets until New Year's Day, and I'm done. I'm sorted.
I'm about 85% pigs and blanket and Yorkshire puddings right now. So yeah,
Best
I
food on
agree.
the market.
Absolutely.
It's a shame that we're not here to talk about a win for Newcastle United down at Old Trafford. Doesn't come as a surprise. I think that's the biggest concern for me, that although I went into this game saying if they got a point, I'd be fuming because they should be going down there and winning. My thought on that hasn't changed. Given how Manchester United ended the game with so many youngsters on the pitch, I still stand by the fact that that is a game Newcastle United should be winning with all their stars in the side. And yet, at the same time, I'm not surprised they didn't win it, because on the road, they just can't manage to pick up points. And it's really, really frustrating, properly frustrating, because they had a lot of possession, although nothing came of it. There's so much to discuss, the whys and what ifs. But Mark, just sum up first and foremost your initial thoughts of last night's game.
It's probably best I don't give you my initial thoughts from after the game. Sort of had a night to sleep on it, and obviously recording this Saturday morning. But I find myself having the same internal discussions where there were some positives, retaining possession well and all that sort of stuff that modern day coaches love to talk about. But at the end of the day, I mean, Newcastle dominated the second half, had the vast majority of possession. They had more crosses in the box, I think, than they have in any game this season. Yet, Lewis Hall's what would have been a wonder strike aside, I don't remember Lamans making too many saves. And that, to me, is really frustrating because, look, that Man United side that started the game will be the worst that Newcastle have played in the Premier League. There's no doubt about it. Now, that's kind of subjective, I get, but I don't think I've ever went to a game at Old Trafford thinking so much that Newcastle will get a positive result than I have last night. And then you look at the team that finished the game for Manchester United, and it was effectively an under-21s or a Carabao Cup team, we'll say. You give some kids a chance, see how they get on. A couple of senior pros in there mixed in for good measure. But I don't see any Newcastle player coming off that pitch last night without regrets. And it was just so frustrating and so disappointing. And I see people trying to make positives out of possession. Well, I'm sorry, but if you're having 3 shots on target from 70-odd% possession or 60-odd, it's just not good enough. Simple as that.
Totally agree with you. And what kind of broke my heart was right at the end, and you saw Bruno looking crestfallen, because I think they did give all they could in terms of energy, plenty of running, but there was just no end product. And it looked like they just lost in a cup final, to be quite honest. And that's a little bit concerning. Clearly, they feel, as we do, frustrated, and that it's just not clicking. I mean, you mentioned there the cross stat. It was 46 crosses they put into the box, but only 7 came off. So we can't be celebrating the fact to put 46 crosses in the box when only 7 actually went to a target. It's not good enough. And the fact that they finished, Man United to finish that game with a formation and with a setup that even by the end of the game, Ruben Amorim was scratching his head thinking, what have I done here? Says it all, really. And the key question I've got about those changes that Manchester United made was, why did he make them? Was it down to injuries or fatigue for Martinez and Luke Shaw? Or was it because he felt like Man United were that comfortable in that low block, in defending their box, that he literally felt he could throw these youngsters on for really their first bit of competitive football, and the setup would survive regardless of the personnel? And if it is the latter, that's rather concerning.
I think that the answer to that is somewhere in the middle. I think he has to manage the fitness of Martinez, particularly because he's just come back. That was his first Premier League start of the season, I think. And particularly Luke Shaw, who we know has a poor injury record. However, what I'd also say is when I look at the back four that finished the game, kind of at some point in your youth career, the emphasis is put on just defending. I know we love these modern defenders who bring the ball out and pass it, but you go back to basic defending, and that's blocking shots, not that there were many, clearing crosses and all that sort of stuff, the real basics, the fundamentals of defending. And Newcastle allowed Manchester United's young defence to fall back on that. They didn't give them anything complicated. They didn't give them anything unexpected or unpredictable. Newcastle were completely predictable. It was get the ball wide, get a cross in, get the ball wide, get a cross in. Now, any defender in the Premier League worth their salt is going to, unless it's an unbelievable cross, which I think I remember one in the game that Jacob Murphy put in, which was in the first half, or unless it's an unbelievable cross, they're going to head it clear for fun. So that's my problem with Newcastle. And it's this thing of, why are they so rigid in the kind of tactical setup? Why don't they change things up? Why did the 3 changes that Eddie Howe made were literally straight swaps? There was no difference in formation. If it was the slightest of slight tweaks. But why not leave Voldemort on and play Visser with him? And maybe instead of bringing Joe Linton on, or actually what I would say is I would have brought Joe Linton on for one of Tonali or Bruno, because they both look shattered. And then maybe play Voldemort in that sort of 10 role that we get told that he's so good in, with Wisser up front, and go into more of a sort of 4-2-3-1 and really go at them. But no, they stuck to what they did near enough at the start of the game. And it's just predictable. Everything's become predictable. I said last night on Twitter, and I got battered for it, I'm bored of watching Newcastle away now, because it's rinse and repeat. It's the same thing every week. Me and you sit here every time after an away game and have the same discussions about, particularly first half last night, the press wasn't there against the Manchester United side that looked scared of having possession. They let them have possession. The goal kind of summed everything up. It was just messy, and there was no clarity in the defending. Nobody went to close it down. We can talk about Ramsdale again, which I'm sure we will. I'm just bored of talking about the same things when it comes to away games. And I think Eddie said after the game that he doesn't see it that way, that, home and away games are all the same. Well, clearly they're not, because you get this monster version of Newcastle United at home, particularly in the last game when we sat and spoke about Chelsea, and then you get whatever yesterday you can class it as. It was just not good enough. Simple as that. Not good enough.
We'll get onto those comments from Eddie Howe later in the show. I want to start by looking at the starting 11. It was unchanged to the side that we saw against Chelsea. And I imagine, Mark, the message would have been, go and take that first half performance against Chelsea and take it into this game. As it was, Newcastle were very passive in the first half. They were probably on top, and the goal does come against the run of play. But again, a bit like the second half, where they were better, they very, very rarely laid a glove on Manchester United, and that is the concerning thing. Bruno had a chance with a header, and it was saved off the line. But other than that, there was very little to write home about. And again, it goes back to that key question: is that why are Newcastle United a one-half side? Because it's not always the second half where they're better. Sometimes the first, but there's clearly an issue where they can't do it for 90 minutes. And Eddie Howe, in his post-match press conference, talked about getting near to that consistency that they're after. But I have to sit here and be honest, I don't see that, because I've not seen anything good consistently under Eddie Howe for a wee while now.
They're nowhere near that consistency levels. I mean, look, when we look at the best we've seen of Eddie Howe's Newcastle throughout the last, 200 games now, it's that I don't care where we're playing. I don't care who we're playing against. We're going to go and take the game to them. We're going to get in their faces. We're going to make it nasty at times. We're going to make it awkward and difficult. I didn't see anything awkward and difficult about that side last night. I saw Manchester United. Yes, they were under, I guess you can call it pressure if you want to, but they never looked uncomfortable. And that's my biggest bugbear. Why they do it, I don't think Eddie Howe and Jason Tindall stood there in the dressing room before a game going, right, go and play passively for the first 45 minutes and then go and try and have a go second half. I don't think against Chelsea they were like getting their faces first half and then second half we'll try and contain a little bit. I cannot see that happening, obviously. So then you look at the players and to me it feels a bit about maybe application. And that's, I'm not absolutely absolving Howe and Tindall of blame. I think they have to become more flexible if Newcastle are going to progress. Now, we look at Man United subs and people were confused by them. And as you said, even Amorim looked a bit confused at one point. But at least he was trying something to get his side through at the end of the game. I look at Newcastle's 3 subs that came on initially when it was, who came on? Joe Linton came on in midfield. You had Wissa came on up top and Barnes came on for Murphy. And it was like for like. There was literally no change. If there was, it was the slightest tweak ever. Why not try something different? I keep saying, I feel like we say this every week. Why not try something a little bit different to unlock a defence that we're becoming increasingly comfortable as full-time approached? And even when the 7 minutes went up additional, I thought, right, even throw Joe Linton up top with Wissa or something. I think Shea went up for a little spell and then went back in defence. Why not go and have a go? Like, if you lose 2-0, you lose 2-0, but at least you've gone and had a go and pushed everyone forward. And it's so frustrating. It really is. Everything feels frustrating about Newcastle.
Do you think Eddie Howe's maybe stung a little bit by the nightmare against AC Milan, potentially? And there's been other games where he has gone for it, maybe been urged on a little bit by the crowd, and that's no criticism of the crowd. We all want to see Newcastle United go and win games, especially when we know there's a strong chance of it. Do you think that maybe plays any part where he's looking back on times he has gone for it and they've ultimately lost the game?
It shouldn't. It really shouldn't, because I look at it and I think, like, as a coach, if you're stung by something that happened 2.5 years ago, then you've got to learn to move on. You've got to learn to evolve. You've got to learn. Look, that AC Milan game, I actually understood why he did what he did. Like, yes, you've gone 1-0 up, you've got a lead. Go and build on it. Go and have a go and try and take it out of sight. We've both been brought up on Newcastle sides that did that. And I think this Newcastle side now has that in it, where it can go and take a game out of sight. But for some reason, this is, and I've mentioned this quite a lot in recent weeks, there seems to be just a mental block at the moment. And I don't know what that is, and I don't know how you clear that, which is probably why I'm not a Premier League manager. Well, one of the reasons. But I think I just looked at last night and everything just felt a bit, oh, well, we feel like we've had a go. Well, no, you didn't really. I'm sorry. And look, I'm not doubting the energy levels or the commitment or the passion or whatever you want to call it, those sort of things we love to fall back on. What I'm doubting is the quality and the determination to go and take the game to Manchester United properly and make them make mistakes and force them into uncomfortable positions and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't really see that from Newcastle, particularly in the last 20 minutes when, look, let's be honest, it was like a training session.
Yeah, there seems to lack that confidence in the final third to actually make something of the possession they had. And look, to have nearly 75 or over 75% possession in the second half at Old Trafford is quite something. But as I said in the build to this game, it's not the Old Trafford of old. It's not the fortress. It's definitely not the Manchester United that we grew up watching and fearing. And regardless of that possession stat, you've got to make more of it. And as we've both said, they didn't test them in the second half, other than Lewis Hall hitting the bar. I think there was maybe one other save, but you never really felt that Newcastle United were going to do anything. And when they got near and in and around the box, and that is hugely, hugely frustrating. I will give some credit. I thought in the first half, as passive as they were, there were 2 or 3 nice moments, especially when they found space down the wings, the little triangle pass, and I thought it actually looked really well. And that's kind of what we love about Newcastle United, how quick they move the ball when they come in off the flank into the middle and then back out to the flank. Good teamwork between a man in the middle and the fullback and the winger, but it didn't happen enough. And then obviously they were hit by the sucker punch of the goal, and hugely, hugely frustrating, because you talk about having to repeat yourself, Mark, and I'm going to repeat myself on 2 points here. Mason Mount, first of all, did exactly what we've been talking about for months and months and months, and actually going into last season as well. The space in front of the defence and behind the midfield, for the love of God, sort it out. He exploited it so early on in the game, and Newcastle United just allowed him to. The frustration about that, other than it happening, is that when he went off, they didn't exploit it because they didn't feel the need to. They're quite happy to sit back and let Newcastle have the ball. So that was frustrating, and I'm sick of repeating myself on that. The second thing, though, the goal. Oh my goodness me! All of Newcastle United's own making, even so, it comes from that long throw. But the first mistake comes from Malik Chiao's decision to head it and not get any proper contact on it, and then it has to go out for a throw. And he didn't need to do that. He tries to head it back towards Jacob Murphy or Lewis Smiley or whoever it was, and it's the wrong decision. They get a throw, ball in the box, and Jacob Ramsey doesn't follow his man, and he allows Dorku to just. I mean, it's a lovely finish. There's no getting away. It's a lovely finish, but there's mistakes in that goal. Ramsey lets his man go, needs to be tighter, and then Ramsdale, strong hand to it. And as Roy Keane said at half time, a top goalkeeper saves that. Ramsdale should do better. But another goal of just absolute errors from Newcastle United. And when we ask why, is that because if you're a Premier League manager, you should not have to keep laying home the message, follow your man, especially on set pieces along throws. That's not a message you should have to give out during the week. But I have to be honest, it's happening far too often. If it's not Ramsey, it's Tonali. If it's not Tonali, it's Bruno. Maybe that's what Howe's got to do from now on in. Hit home with the basics. Follow your man when you're meant to be marking.
But again, I don't think that is a message that has to be sent to players at this level, or it shouldn't be anyway. It comes to a lack of, I don't want to say confidence, because I don't think it is a confidence thing, but I think you're possibly looking at it's decision making in decisive moments, and Newcastle's decision making in the last sort of few months, particularly away from home, has been abysmal. And they're punished because at the top level, even against an understrength Manchester United side, you still get punished. And that's what's happened. They got punished for being passive. Again, use that word a lot, but it's happening more and more. For being passive in a tough, and it was a tough game. It's always a tough game when you go to Old Trafford, unless you do really impose yourself, which Newcastle didn't. It's that I want people to take responsibility. That's what I want from Newcastle now. Yes, I should have went and closed that man down. Yes, I shouldn't have tried that header. You're at fault. Own it. And I think that's a problem. I don't know if people are owning errors at the moment. And I think when you look, again, there were errors from the management team and from the players last night, and they've got done for it.
For me, the other thing I want to see, yes, individuals need to start taking responsibility, but I would love to be in the dressing room. Is Bruno getting Jacob Ramsey up against the wall and saying, "What are you doing? Why aren't you marking?" That might seem a little bit extreme, but you look around, and the other concern is that there's no reaction. Now, of course, what happens on the pitch in the moment after a mistake might be vastly different to what happens in the dressing room at half-time or full-time. But there doesn't seem to be that on-pitch reaction, and we need that. We need a reaction from the leaders as well. And I think a lot of people have said over the last few weeks that there seems to be a lack of leadership on the pitch. Bruno can't do it all. They're missing Trippier. They're missing Dan Burn. But there does seem to be this kind of air of silence and kind of acceptance when a mistake's made. And we've seen it far too often over the last few games where the goals have been entirely avoidable. but you're not seeing any reaction from leaders in the aftermath of the said goal.
No, I must admit, I think Trippier is a bigger miss than people maybe expected. I mean, in terms of talent, then I don't think you can question Tino Livramento or Lewis Hall for that matter. But in terms of that leadership, I think they're not quite ready for that role yet. I actually think Livramento will turn into that sort of Trippier-style leader. But at the moment, it's not quite there. And I just think maybe they are suffering for a lack of like genuine leadership. Like you kind of hope Tonali would take that sort of role as a, yes, he's still fairly young, but as someone who is experienced in the sense of has all these Champions League and Serie A and now Premier League games under his belt. I feel for Bruno a little bit, I've got to be honest, and I said it the other day, but I feel like he's just taking on a little bit too much, where he's feeling as if he's having to haul teams through games. And you can sense it when it gets to that desperation stage that he's now. He did it last night again. I want the ball everywhere. I want to try and do everything. I'm going to do this, this, and this. And I feel for him a little bit to a degree because I feel he's being put in that position where he has to do that.
Yeah, and he can't do it all. Others need to step up. But again, we mentioned it last week when you're seeing your captain try to go that extra mile, running through every wall possible for the manager, the team, the supporters. And why doesn't that motivate you to do it? And that is the big question. You know, they should be looking to Bruno for that motivation, and yet no one seems to be jumping on the same train with him. And that is slightly concerning. We mentioned there Ramsdale and Roy Keane's thoughts on him. Mark, it's fair to say that I'm far from convinced with Aaron Ramsdale, and I agree with Roy Keane. You know, if you get that much of a hand to the ball, you've got to be saving that.
Look, again, go back to repeating ourselves, but it's the whole thing of not being 100% convinced by either Pope or Ramsdale. And look, I wouldn't be shocked if, I think Eddie said Pope was ill before the game last night, so couldn't have started anyway. But if he is recovered in time for, if he has recovered, sorry, in time for Tuesday, then I wouldn't be shocked if Pope plays at Burnley. I just think it was a good strike. It really was. I'm not taking anything away from Dorgu. But I just feel as if it hasn't flew past Ramsdale. It's not, it's not an 80-mile-an-hour shot that's flown the top corner. It's a pretty decent height you can get down to. And once you get a hand on it, I think any Premier League goalkeeper worth a salt would be disappointed that he hasn't got it around the post. Now, the reaction time I'll give him because there was someone in front of him. And I know there was a brief kind of VAR check, wasn't there, for a possible offside, which would have been generous to say the least. But I just feel he's got to do a little better. I really do. And I think it goes back to the conversations we've had many, many times over the last 3 months of next summer. Newcastle absolutely must go out and get a top-class goalkeeper and end any of this doubt about, who's best in goal, who's this, who's that. Go and get someone who you're going to look at and really hang your hat on in the manner that, Liverpool did with Alisson and Manchester City did with Edison all those years ago. Go and end any doubt. Go and get clarity. This is our man. We've paid big for him. He's going to be our goalkeeper for the long term.
Screw that. Go and do it in January. Pay the extra 15, 20 million pounds that will inevitably come with a January transfer window signing. There's no time like the present, because if Newcastle United's away form doesn't start to pick up, then you can pretty much write off what they're going to achieve in the league. Unfortunately, I hate to say that. I think right now the table's so congested that it is 2 or 3 wins and you shoot up the table, and that is a real saving grace so far for the domestic campaign. But with that in mind, if the away form doesn't start to pick up, Newcastle don't start to move up the table, why not make that big decision now? Why not make that big move? And at least by the time the new season comes around, that player's bedded in, he knows his teammates, he knows the way the game is played, and he's settled and he's ready for the new campaign. I know it's a big call to sign a new goalkeeper, and it's not going to be easy in January, but I'd be disappointed if they aren't at least looking and seeing if they can bring a new number one in next month, because it's what's needed.
Yeah, I just think they may look at it, and I'm not saying I don't. They may look at it that they've got other priorities. I know midfielders kind of a key, because I think a midfielder might move on next month. Fullback certainly will be, but again, and I think again this has been something that's kind of been said internally, that they don't want to sign someone short term. If they're going to bring anyone in, it's going to be a long term deal, because you are going to have Trippier back, you are going to have Burn back, you are going to have Kraft back to fitness. Now, if certainly one of the right backs was to move on, then they're going to need another right back. But I just think they'll see it as that they've got bigger priorities at the moment. And again, I'm not saying that I don't think they have, that they'll focus on next month. And that I don't think that'll be a goalkeeper. I think they'll look elsewhere. But to a degree, I do agree to a degree. I just think that'll be maybe one they'll prioritise in the summer instead.
Let us know in the comments your thoughts on where Newcastle need to prioritise this January. Is it a goalkeeper? Is it other positions in the team? I agree with you, Mark, that a midfielder is up there as well. I think a man who's more defensively minded and can sit and protect is what Newcastle need to go at. But that would require a change in formation. And you mentioned it earlier in the show. Why didn't Eddie Howe roll the dice and go with two up top with Nick Voldemort and Johan Wissa? Look, we have to say that Johan Wissa's still coming back from injury. He has to manage those minutes of Wissa. We don't want to see him go too far too soon and then pick up an injury and ruled out for weeks or months, because that would be devastating for all Newcastle and Johan Wissa and the supporters. But a game like this, where Man United are penned in, where your initial approach, your initial formation hasn't worked, why not try two up top? Why not just try for 20 minutes? Or as you mentioned, a number 10, and then Wissa playing off Voldemort. That's what I think many would have done. That's what many wanted. And maybe Eddie Howe, he's reluctant. Maybe he's a little bit nervous to do so. I mean, it's something that everyone wanted. So why didn't he do it?
But so again, we'll go back to transfers, which I know we'll be talking about more in the next sort of couple of weeks. But I actually think in terms of midfield, there is a need for a genuine number 10 for games like this. And I'm not saying someone that'll play every game week in, week out. They may well do. But I just feel for someone just to unlock a defence with something a little bit different. Now, I actually think Bruno could do that role, by the way. I think he could play further forward as a 10, because we've seen the amount of intricate passes that he can play to unlock a defence. But I don't really see anyone else like that in the squad. So I do think there is a need to go out and get someone. I know Keith Smith from Altwar's been mentioned, hasn't he, as a possible, as they see him as that sort of midfielder. But half of Europe want him as well. And with all due respect to Newcastle, as much as we love them, if some of the clubs that are being linked with him do come in for him, you'd be shocked if he does end up in Newcastle. Now, that to me has to be a priority in January or certainly in the summer, along with the goalkeeper. They'd be my first two, particularly in the summer, where you can maybe get them for slightly, and I underline the word slightly cheaper than you would in the January market, which is always difficult to navigate. But there's a distinct lack of creativity in central areas, because you look at the midfielders in there and you think of the main three, Joe Linton, Bruno and Tonali have all been brilliant in their time at Newcastle, and particularly in the last sort of 2 years. But you don't expect them to do something out the unexpected in terms of unlocking a defence. Jacob Ramsey's still kind of finding his feet, and I was a little bit disappointed last night we didn't see more of him. Lewis Miley, again, I will say, did very well at right back, but we know he's a midfielder. But is he that midfielder that's going to, again, unlock a defence? Probably not. And Joe Willock, I think, will leave the club in one of the next two transfer windows anyway, and is so far away from the Joe Willock that we know he can be. It's ridiculous. So there is a need for and I'm not saying go out and get this standard of player, but a player in the ilk of a David Silva, someone who's going to play in that sort of 10 role and just unlock defences with clever passes to release, either the wingers cutting inside or the striker. And I think that's what's missing, particularly, like I say, in games last night when you've got a defence just on the edge of their own box or in their own box, just something a little bit different, take a bit of a risk and just try and do something to unlock it. Because, again, I just felt as if Newcastle just didn't have that in them last night.
But isn't that where Nick Voldemort comes into his own? Isn't he the number 10 that we all claim Newcastle United need?
Well, I'd like to see it, at least have a look at it. And I felt like last night was a missed opportunity in that sense. Now, I think, and I can't say this with any certainty, Eddie will probably fall back upon fitness and trying to maintain that fitness over the Christmas period and all that sort of stuff. But they've just come back off the longest break of the season. So why not leave him on for 90, bring Wissa on as well, give him half an hour, whatever it was, 25 minutes, and go with the two, or certainly the one just off the other. But to me, last night felt like the biggest chance to do that so far in a game and just see how they work. It may not, but at least you've had a go in that short spell. There just seems a reluctance, and I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, it was crying out for that kind of something a little bit different because it has become a little bit predictable. And I think what we saw with Voldemort before Wissa came on is the same old complaint. He was dropping deep, he was winning the ball and he was doing it well, but then there was no one to hit. And then we saw crosses going at the box mark. And again, there was two or three where an out and out striker gambles and gets the ball on target, and that wasn't happening. And that's when I was sitting there thinking, well, one or two things have to happen here. Either Voldemort comes off and you put Wissa into that position where Murphy's feeding the ball in the box, because those two examples I mentioned, Wissa's on the end of that, or he's at least trying to be. Voldemort is not. And no disrespect to him, it's not his natural game. The second thing is you bring Wissa on, you sacrifice a midfielder, and you play Voldemort in that number 10, where he's been playing the majority of the game anyway, let's be fair.
Yeah.
The only difference is that he turns, brings other people into play, and there's a man to hit in the box.
I think, yeah, you make a good point about the fact that when Voldemort is dropping deep and playing his natural game, it's leaving a massive gap in that sort of 9 role, the lead role in attack. And I do feel as if there's a responsibility for a Anthony Gordon or a Jacob Murphy to start doing what they actually do when they're in possession, which is cutting inside and going and occupying the space where Voldemort has been. And I can't understand why it hasn't even been tried yet. You know, even in games when they have been comfortable since Wissa's come back, and they are few and far between, by the way, why there isn't that sort of let's go and try it. You know, I hope it's been worked on in training. You would hope it is. I think it has to be. But at the moment, it's just there's a complete reluctance, and I don't know why. Now, possibly with a more favourable FA Cup draw rather than the Bournemouth one, maybe you would have tried it then against, sort of, with all due respect, against lesser opposition if they've got an EFL club or even a non-league club. But it's got to be tried. I mean, Wissa obviously hasn't gone to the AFCON, which is a massive bonus, because if he had gone, then they would have been in some serious trouble, especially with Asula, still injured by all accounts. Again, I could pop back to the same word, and I've used it so many times, and so have you. It's just all frustrating in that sense. Why not have a go with it? Why the reluctance? Why not at least try and see where we go? But yeah, it's a little bit bemusing why it hasn't been at least tried for a short spell in the game yet.
Let us know in the comments your thoughts. Would you like to see Wissa and Voldemort play up top, or Voldemort as that number 10 with Wissa playing off him? And we have got some viewpoints sent in by our listeners and viewers, so thank you for getting in touch and sending your thoughts on last night's game. I'll read some of them out in a moment. But Mark, first and foremost, let's talk about the penalty decision that wasn't given. Martinez was a judge not to have handled the ball. I have to say, I thought it was a handball. The decision to not award it, and it was said because his hands were in that position because he was doing something else rather than trying to block the ball. And you scratch your head and say, what? Because there's something else was pushing Malik Chow. So is he not therefore committing a foul in the first place? Apparently not, according to VAR. And look, I don't want to go over all ground with my thoughts on VAR. We discussed it last week, but this is one of those moments where you just send him to the monitor and you let the referee make that decision, because I wouldn't be half as angry as I am now about that decision had Anthony Taylor been allowed to go to the monitor and he stuck by his call. And I go, fair enough, he's had the chance to look at it from 7,000 different angles and he's stuck to his original decision. No issue with that at all. I think it's a penalty. Yes, the distance between him and the player isn't huge. So you could argue that there's not really enough distance for his hands not to be in an unnatural position. But I think that's a handball all day long.
I mean, I think it's possibly one of those where if Anthony Taylor gives it, then VAR doesn't overturn it. Now, my initial instinct was penalty because his arms weren't in a natural position. And the only reason they weren't in a natural position, if they were, was because he was pushing Malik Chow. Now, there was some sort of waffle said on Sky as well about the fact that it hit his chest and then his hand, which is nonsense. But then he almost, I don't know if it was a reactionary thing, but he almost scooped it away. And I can't see how it hasn't been given. And look, that's now 2 games in a row where Newcastle should have had penalties. I haven't heard Ref Watch yet, if it has been on. I haven't heard the views of other referees, either retired or whatever. But when you look at the Gordon thing on in the Chelsea game, the foul by Chalobah, and then last night, I mean, these are difference makers. And I said it on the Monday show, didn't I, about these are kind of decisions that have just gone against Newcastle that have cost points. Now, that's not to say the penalty definitely would have been scored. You know, that there's no guarantee on that. But at the same time, and another thing I will say is that wasn't the reason Newcastle lost the game last night. But I can't look at that again, and I've watched it again this morning and see why it hasn't been given. It's just completely bemusing. And the excuses used by the PGMOL when they released this is why the decision wasn't given. I just shake my head when I read them. And did you notice last night, by the way, and I'm sorry, I'm going to move away from the penalty, when Tonali did he get booked for the shoulder to shoulder? So exactly the same thing that happened with Chalobah and Gordon against Chelsea.
Well, that's what we said, though, isn't it? Anywhere else on the pitch, and that's a foul.
Yeah. There's no consistency. And I'm sorry, but this season, and I can't off the top of my head pick out examples, but we've seen penalties given for handballs like that. So where is the consistency? And it goes back to what I said last week, which is no matter what we do, no matter how much technology we have, it still comes down to human decision. So you either, or human error, yeah. So you either scrap the whole thing and we'll just go back on the field and give referees some responsibility back, because I feel as if they've now got a safety net when it comes to decision making, and I think it's made them more hesitant to make big decisions. Now, I could be wrong here, and maybe I'm, dreaming to a degree, but I don't feel as if we had to go at referees as much as we do now, as we did pre-VAR. And that's bemusing, because it was brought in to stop any discussion over, this is clear cut, this is a penalty, this is, that's a red card, because someone 250 odd miles away in a box somewhere watching the game on TV said, no, you need to have a look at that again. They just need to scrap it. Simple as that. Just go back to just four officials, your 2 assistants, your referee, and a 4th official who can help maybe give decisions as they should do anyway. Or I think they should, if something gets flagged up that the referee misses. So, it's annoying, but again, I'll go back and say it wasn't. That's not the reason Newcastle lost last night.
Yeah, and that is the key thing to say, is as annoying as it was and as frustrating as it was, it's not the reason Newcastle United lost last night. It was their failure to get the better of a youthful and an experienced and a chaotic Manchester United side. And as Marcus said, it's simply not good enough. These are the games that Newcastle United, with this squad, with the talent they've got, with the ability they've got to be winning these games. The manager and the players, there is a bit of shared collective responsibility. I think there's questions to be raised over the application, over the confidence of the players on the pitch. It's all good having, as we've said, 75% possession in the second half, but it's no good if your legs turn to jelly when you get within 10 yards of the penalty area, because possession doesn't win you cups, possession doesn't win you points, possession does not get you Champions League football. And that's my biggest concern, is that we can sit here and we can say, oh, that was good for 10 minutes. That was good for a first half. That second half was brilliant. The first half was a bit rubbish. But we're in December.
Yeah.
We're in December. Newcastle United are in the bottom half of the table. Admittedly, a couple of wins and you're back in the European picture. Yes, they're in the semi-final of the Carabao Cup. Yes, they look like they're going to get to the next stage of the Champions League if they win the next couple of games. So there are positives. There are, rays of light. But if we're looking at the Premier League campaign, right now Newcastle United are in a position which they don't want to be in, which, given their spend, they shouldn't be in. And given we are in December, I think we're running out of road where we can keep saying next game it clicks, next game it clicks. It has to click and has to click now and on a consistent basis. No good going and beating Burnley 4-5-0 at Turf Moor in a few days' time if then the next away game, I can't remember off the top of my head who it's against. I think January's mainly just at home, isn't it? But they need to go on a consistent run of good games, good performances, and good results.
Can I ask you a question? Do you think they've gone backwards this season?
I think they're in the middle of a bit of a identity crisis. So yes, I think in some ways they have gone back. I think the summer didn't help. The Alexander Isak saga, I think, has maybe impacted Newcastle United a lot more than maybe we thought it would have, a lot more than just a player leaving. And I think Eddie Howe is trying to transition to a new side. He's mentioned it plenty of times about how they are trying to morph into something different. I think right now he's just struggling to get to where he wants to be with this side. I still think there's a strong chance it will click into place and it will happen. But the longer we go into the season, it doesn't. And you look at the summer and who might leave, they don't get European football, etc., etc. The knock-on effects are huge. So we have to hope that it clicks and it clicks like now. And yeah, I just think they're in the a confusion state of what they want to be. And I think Eddie Howe is trying to change into a team that has more control on the ball. But as we're seeing, you can have that control, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get chances on goal, let alone actual goals.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I just think it's such a strange season because you look at the cup competitions and you think into the semi-final of the Carabao, brilliant. Yes, they've got a tricky FA Cup game against Bournemouth at home, but being at home, you wouldn't be shocked if they came through it. As you mentioned, I think a win against PSV, and they're pretty much into the knockout stages in terms of the playoff anyway. So in that sense, you think that's a really good season, progression in 3 cup competitions. And then you look at the league, and if you'd said at the start of the season, Newcastle, or at the end of last season, we'll say, Newcastle would be sat firmly in mid-table, with a dismal away record as it is. And to be in the situation where they are struggling to find this, as you say, the identity and, get back to the aggressive approach, not nasty sounds terrible, but, the making life difficult for opposition and kind of overawing them and overpowering them, not being able to do that on a consistent basis, I think you'd be really disappointed. And I think that's my thing, where the amount of games I've come away from watching this season where you go, I was really disappointed with how Newcastle did there, or how Newcastle set up, or why didn't they do this, or why didn't they do that. You're coming away from games with more questions and answers, and that's a weekly basis, by the way. Even when they've played well for 45 minutes against Chelsea, you still come away from that game thinking, why didn't this happen? Why didn't that happen? And that's the biggest frustration for me. I do think they've gone backwards to a degree. I think, look, last season wasn't perfect, but it felt it because of the end goal. And maybe, let's be honest, we could be the week after the season, everyone could be back on the Town Moor again with a trophy and celebrating. And, Newcastle lifted the FA Cup or even the Carabao Cup again. So in that sense, it would be a successful season. But at the moment, and I've used this so many times on here, but I feel as if I have to repeat myself, everything feels tough at the moment. Everything feels difficult. Even the basics feel difficult. And I'll tell you one moment that summed it up last night, and I don't know if you heard this. I think it was Jason Tyndall on the touchline midway through the first half has shouted, JJ, go and get on the ball. And it was JJ's Jacob Ramsey. And he's gone and got on the ball, tried to play a 10-yard pass to Jacob Murphy out wide, and it's gone straight out of play. And that at that moment, I literally did the face palm emoji where, just like, oh my God, like what they're doing. And that kind of summed last night up for me. But it's been a horrible season in the sense of that it's never felt as if it was going to live up to what happened last year, which, let's be honest, for many of us, it's been the greatest season we've witnessed in Newcastle. And this season feels a little bit of an anticlimax at the moment, which seems ridiculous when they're in a Carabao Cup semi-final, they're still in the FA Cup, and they could be qualifying for the knockout rounds of the Champions League for the first time.
I think if Eddie Howe didn't have so many games to manage and balance, then I think he would have moved on to that next stage of his evolution as Newcastle United manager. And I think we'd be seeing Newcastle United actually much further up the table, playing better football, winning home and away. But I think the fact that they've got limited time on the training pitch is having a massive, massive impact. And look, it's not an excuse because this comes with qualifying for the Champions League, and this is exactly where you want to be. But I still think it has to be taken a little bit into consideration. It doesn't, wash away some of the errors that have been made in game and some of the questionable decisions that have been made from the dugout. But again, there's been a lot of criticism of Eddie Howe and the staff over the last 24 hours. I think there are questions to be asked, but also we can't forget the role of the players in this. It's up to them to spark into life in those last 20 minutes. Eddie Howe's game plan, whether you agree with it or not, they've got control of that game. For that second half, they've got control of that game. He can't run on the pitch and put the ball in the back of the net. Yes, he can if he can impact it by making the right decisions when it comes to the subs, but then he's seeing things we don't see during the week. There will be a reason why he feels he can't play Voldemort and Wissa. It's probably down to fitness. Okay, we don't like it, but we have to accept that. We give them the benefit of the doubt because again, they've got the minutes from the last medical meeting, they've got all the stats, etc., etc. But the players also have to take some responsibility, and it goes back to what we said earlier in the show. You're watching Bruno run around like a wild man, running through fire, then through a brick wall, and then swimming down the Tyne to try and get Newcastle over the line. Why is no one else helping him? Why is no one else stepping up with that energy and that passion and that drive and that desire? And that's frustrating. Hall and Lewis Miley, the only two that came out with any credit based on actual performance rather than passion and drive and desire. Bruno comes out with, as we've said, that those markers all ticked. But the players in those last 20 minutes, they have to do something with the ball other than just pass it sideways and then get to 10 yards by the box and then suddenly just kind of lose their heads.
Because they haven't got enough risk takers. They haven't got genuine difference makers. Now, when you look at them in the Newcastle squad, one of the first that should come to mind is Anthony Gordon. But we're talking about someone who hasn't scored a goal in open play in the Premier League since, was it January? So almost a whole calendar year now without a goal in open play in the Premier League. Now, I had sympathy for Jacob Murphy because he put, like I said earlier, he put one of the best crosses you'll see in the first half, and everyone's just on their heels. And I mentioned this last week, by the way, a little bit like Bonds when he should have scored against Chelsea later on when he's attacked the back post. Nobody's doing that. Nobody's committing in the box, and this is the same conversations. And this is what I meant when I said that I was bored. I'm bored of having the same conversations about why isn't this happening? Why aren't players attacking the box? Why aren't they taking risks? When look, I can sit and watch a game as a layman and say, well, when Jacob Murphy gets the ball, he's going to get it out his feet and swing a cross in. So surely a professional footballer at the top level of the game should see that and think, right, I'm going to commit in the box and try and make something happen. And it didn't happen. So you're looking on Voldemort and to the slightest of degrees, Gordon getting in there. But even that cross Murphy put in first half, Voldemort stood penalty spot, I think, and Gordon's kind of on his heels approaching the back post too late. And that, to me, speaks volumes of where Newcastle are at in the attacking third right now, where there's just a lack of, and I keep going back to this word, I'm sorry, but this lack of clarity about what people should be doing in these moments. Like, you look at Wissa's goal in the Carabao Cup game. I would love to see Voldemort get more goals like that. Yeah, 6-8 yard tap-ins that every striker worth their salt should be getting 10 over a season.
Well, we saw against Chelsea what happens when he's in the right position. That's where he needs to be. And for whatever reason, as we discussed, he's not. I don't think he's ever going to be there consistently. We can go over the reasons, but we all know the reasons. I did say we'd read some views out of our listeners and viewers. Before I do that, I just want to read out a quote from Eddie Howe after the game about the poor away form. He said, "We're not ducking the issue and not trying to be clever, but I just think we need to look at the performances in isolation. Whether home or away, it's irrelevant, really. I think it's about what the team's identity is on that day and how it plays. If it's home or away for me, I don't really care." So you look back to the Chelsea game for 45 minutes. we were excellent, everything that we want to be. Today, for the second half, I think we were good without the goals. So I think we're getting closer, as I say, for me, than we've been this season, but we've still got areas to improve. Thoughts on that?
Can that be it? That side, can that be the thought? Look, I think we're in danger of talking about Newcastle like a junior team, where we talk about, oh, well, they did that well, but we need to improve that. And it's basics at times that we're talking about. Like, I used to coach again now, like under 11s, and I've said similar things about that side, like, oh, we did this really well today, well done. But, we could have done this a little bit better. When was the last time Newcastle put a complete performance in a 90-minute performance? I don't think there's been one this season. You're probably looking at the Carabao Cup final, aren't you? Let's be honest. And that's frustrating for a team that are supposedly on the up. And I know, look, we can go back and talk about the summer, and I've got no doubt how disruptive it was. It was awful. But at the same time, the money that was brought in for the Isaac situation, you just question, has it been spent correctly? Have they gone out and got the right players? I think that's kind of the biggest part of why they haven't hit the ground running this season, because everyone they brought in, there was kind of little question marks over them. There wasn't a signing in the summer. I mean, Voldemort, I think, will go on and be a very big player for the club. And I think he'll improve once he's got more Premier League games under his belt. And I mean that in terms of a whole season, not just, whatever it is now, 19 or whatever. Elanga felt like the one that was going to work. But at the same time, he was someone who was used to working in a counter-attacking system. Ramsey, there was question marks over his fitness. Wissa, it's unfortunate what's happened to him. You'd give them some leeway on that one. But and Ramsdale was just a strange one. Clearly they wanted Trafford, but didn't happen. And I just think the seeds were kind of sown in the summer, the way everything played out, incomings and outgoings. And I just think there is a need to have and this may well come with Ross Wilson getting his feet under the table. And I hope it does, because I would like to see Ross Wilson take control of everything recruitment-wise and work with Steve Nixon and the scouting team and really go and, put something structured together, because I feel as if for a good couple of years now, certainly during Paul Mitchell's time at the club, there's just so many questions raised about recruitment. And I actually think, on the whole, since PIF took charge, the recruitment's been really solid and really positive. But just in the last couple of windows, and I don't know if it is a kind of combination of factors of Paul Mitchell being a little bit kind of disruptive, and obviously Ross Wilson not really being in time for the summer transfer window, I just feel there's a need of something more structured and something more planned going forwards. And hopefully we'll see the fruits of that in January, and certainly during the summer.
Fingers crossed. Right, let's get on to some replies from our viewers and listeners. We've got Scott saying a copy and paste away performance. And in all honesty, outside of maybe 2 or 3 months at best, we've been bang average for the last 18 months. Biffa says, why don't we ever try to impact the game with a tactical change? Leave Voldemort on and go 4-2-3-1 or 4-4-2. We're actually missing a Sula who can run at people. Bridge Down says, what is our identity other than power and athleticism, which other teams have now caught up with? We've got Mala saying certain players aren't trying. I don't care anymore. We've got Tim saying Howe's trick was to get an average side playing out of their skins, who remain for the most part a bang average side, but have lost that intensity, drive, and look as well. We've got Marg8092 saying we've been sussed out, and he doesn't feel Howe knows how to fix it. We've got Blowsy saying Eddie has proven himself to be one of the best Saturday managers around, but this is now his second European season, and the team is again struggling to manage 2 games a week. The January transfer window will be crucial to save our season. We've got Sid saying the conclusion is that our summer transfer window was genuinely poor. And we've got Mandy saying she feels that they're in serious trouble. So the question was, what was the key takeaway from the game at Old Trafford? And sometimes, nearly every time we ask a similar question, we do get 1 or 2 positive and optimistic takes on it, but not there. Anything that you want to just go on, Mark, before we sign off?
Yeah, at the moment, I was sort of falling back on the fact of whenever Eddie's been questioned since he's come to the club, he's answered those questions pretty emphatically now. I still believe he'll find the answers. I really do, because he's kind of done that throughout his time at the club. And but the problem now is the fact that those questions are mounting up, and they're not just singular questions; they're now multiple. And I think, yes, the players have got to take responsibility, 100%, because they're the ones that go out and carry out what the manager asks of them. You know, Eddie, to a degree, can't control them when they're on the pitch. He can't stop people making poor decisions in certain areas, like we discussed with the goal last night. But at the moment, I think there is a need for some serious questions to be asked. And I'm not saying whether Eddie should be, Newcastle manager should be removed and replaced with someone, because I think with that, there's always a question of who replaces him, and that comes with a whole other discussion. This is the man that led Newcastle to the Carabao Cup final win, which we always waited for. He's the one that led them away from the relegation when he first came in. He's the one that has taken them into 2 Champions League campaigns and is now within touch and distance of getting into the knockout stages for the first time in the club's history. But I also feel that Eddie has something to prove about, is he the man to make Newcastle consistent challengers at the top end? Because if we are to, what PIF are saying, if what David Hopkinson's saying, there is a desire and ambition, whatever you want to call it, to become the best around. Now it's down to Eddie Howe, much like some of the players, by the way, not letting them off, to prove that they're worthy, or they're able, or they're capable, whatever you want to say, to be part of that. And we want to go and be a top 4 side every year. We want to be in cup finals year on year. We want to be in the Champions League year on year. Can you be the person, whether that's Eddie Howe or one of the players, to take Newcastle to that position where they are challenging your Man Cities, your Arsenals, your Liverpools on an annual basis? So I think that's the biggest question to be answered of Eddie and some of the playing staff over the next sort of 6 months to a year.
Hopefully we get the right answers and the positive answers. Hopefully we get a win against Burnley in a few days' time. Goodness knows we need that, so we can head into the new year in slightly better and higher spirits. It's going to be a busy January to come. Big thanks to Mark for popping onto the podcast and reflecting on that 1-0 defeat to Manchester United down at Old Trafford. Not the way we wanted to spend our Boxing Day, but we are here talking about it nonetheless. We hope you've enjoyed your festive celebrations and enjoy what's to come. And for myself and Mark, we'll see you guys very soon.